Okay, and they're recording. Yeah, so we'll take turns. Me, Juliana, Aaron, just kind of go around, and I'll start. Just say, introduce yourself and say why you're running. And we can start with William.
Yeah, good morning. My name is William Bailey, and I've been with the Sheriff's Office for nearly 24 years now. Started out as a volunteer and have held as many positions and ranks as you can. For the most part, there's definitely a couple of things I haven't been able to accomplish, but and then for the last couple of years now serving as the captain of the patrol division. And what I saw was an opportunity that the office was doing really well. No agency is perfect. We can always do things better. We learn, we grow, but there was definitely on a good path. And when I agreed to run for sheriff, I told the sheriff that I would not follow his path. I had my own course I wanted to lay and my own goals and things I wanted to accomplish, and he completely understood that and then supported me in my candidacy for sheriff.
All right. Go ahead, Ken.
My name is Ken Vander Kamp. I am a detective sergeant with the Deschutes County Sheriff's Office. I am currently assigned to the Central Oregon Drug Enforcement Team, which is a multi-jurisdictional, multi-agency task force based here in Bend that serves Deschutes, Jefferson, and Kirk counties. I started at the Sheriff's Office same as a volunteer about 20 years ago. After moving my family, I had a young family up here about 25 years earlier, and was able to kind of live more in a community than the city, which is what brought me to Bend. It also drew me to the Sheriff's Office because it was an opportunity to connect with my community as a volunteer at search and rescue. Since I've been there, I was a patrol deputy, a reserve deputy, special services deputy, ultimately went into detective work, worked criminal detectives, street crimes detectives, major crimes, and then ultimately went to work in narcotics at Central Oregon Drug Enforcement as a detective. I left Code as a detective after promoting as a sergeant to patrol, went back to patrol, and ultimately promoted back to Central Oregon Drug Enforcement. So I went back there about almost 4 years ago now. So my background is also simultaneously being in law enforcement, and prior to law enforcement I was in business, and I have kind of unique eye as an entrepreneur to seek out opportunities to grow and develop teams and organizations. I was approached by several deputies, both in the correction side and on the patrol side, about a year and a half ago, and asked about my interest because they were drawn to me because of my mentorship and my ability to teach and lead, and asked me if I would be interested in running for sheriff because they had seen some changes that were going on within the organization, and I studied them closely and I saw several opportunities for growth and ultimately agreed. And about a year ago now, not even that, almost a year, I announced to run for sheriff because I wanted to bring those changes to the culture, grow the organization, bring it back together, and ultimately seek out some changes in the community that we're likely to talk about here.
Yeah, definitely. I forgot to mention, if when we're answering, if either of you want to respond to your opponent's statement, you are definitely allowed to do that after they're done.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Well, the next question is sort of what's the biggest issue for this year? And Ken, if you want to start.
Gosh, the biggest issue that's on top of everybody's minds. So Deschutes County is telling me that homelessness continues to plague them, and they're concerned, and so am I. I think we're at a point now where the homelessness issue has brought so many problems to not only the community and the residents, but the homeless and the people that are out there that are not well. And the danger is very true, and I think the biggest threat right now that we see is in those homeless camps that are close to communities like China Hat Road is a great example. I think China Hat Road is the highest potential for danger. Fire danger, thefts, stabbings, shootings, everything's going on out there that needs to stop. Fortunately, we have tools now that we're able to use, and the Forest Service is able to help with that. But homelessness seems to be the biggest of those issues, and then they go hand in hand with the mental health issue, which is very broken in Oregon. Mm-hmm. And I think that the state really needs to pay some attention to that. There's been a couple reports that came out, one in June, where they're studying the mental health hospitals and how they need to grow and widen out in Oregon. They don't want to add any more beds, but they want to add services. The state really needs to come to the table and offer some opportunities there. Here in Deschutes County, we have some great third-party service providers that have reached out to me, and we've connected, and they see a vision of helping those homeless people and getting them off the streets and getting them the help that they need. But it's not going to be a one-size-fits-all. It's going to take, each person is going to have a unique crisis and a unique problem, and we need to get to that point where we can work with service providers and get everybody to the table and have the state support that. But that's probably the biggest, to answer your question, that I have on my list right now.
Okay, great.
I would agree, homelessness is the number one talking point. Homelessness and fire risk in conjunction with each other. We saw a couple fires this past summer, even though summer's not over. We're 2 near misses with fires to the east side of Lapine, and then also Milepost 132 fire. And so since I've been a captain, I have worked nearly solely on this issue and concern, and some would call it even a crisis at this point. And so the last 2 years I've been at the table of the conversations, meeting regularly with the Forest Service. We meet nearly monthly about specifically China Hat Road, and then the collaboration and cooperation that we can do together, because those are complicated issues. You have different jurisdictional issues, different laws that can be enforced, and we have different roles. And so where there are things that law enforcement, sheriff's office can enforce under state law, there are certain things we cannot. And so, but unless we're at the table together talking about those, how can we work better together? And then also trying to make the problem better, find solutions in the short term. There was a lot of court changes over the last 2 years and things that we've been waiting on and working through, but fire risk wasn't going away. The risk to our communities wasn't going away, nor was the feedback I was getting that something has to be done. And so last year, working with the Forest Service, they initially purchased fire extinguishers for us to start handing out in the camps and giving them a little bit of training on fire prevention. How do you stop a fire? Maybe safer cooking methods. And then I dedicated a full-time deputy last summer to specifically China Hat and Juniper Ridge area with patrols, doing proactive patrols. That deputy was able to stop 9 fires with just his proactive patrols, finding people cooking or campfires that were abandoned and put fires out to keep them from growing to a point where we had a fire coming into one of our neighborhoods. And then this past year, problem was still there, so I expanded it, added 2.5 deputies to that full-time patrol, nearly county-wide, and then also worked with the Central Oregon Intergovernmental Council, City of Lapine, to purchase 250 fire extinguishers, which we've handed out throughout the camps to ensure that they have that tools, and then some information sheets about safer cooking methods. We've also outfitted originally 30, we bought 20 more 5-gallon water tanks, or pressurized water, so that the deputies are not firefighters. I don't expect them to be, but I also know when they go to a call, if a fire has an opportunity to be stopped or slowed till fire department get there, they're going to take it. And so giving them a tool to do that, and these have been overwhelmingly successful. Definitely the Milepost 132 fire started on private land, and so that was not an area being actively patrolled, but as much effort as we can. And then as sheriff, I have a plan to implement a dedicated law enforcement homeless outreach team that's working with service providers, the county host team, and law enforcement to help address this issue on a daily basis, not just during fire season, not just when something bad happens, but with the number of resources, shelter options, housing options that are going to be coming online in the next few months. We need teams dedicated to focus on this 7 days a week.
Great, thank you. William, I'm going to start this one with you. What's your take on the Deschutes County Deflection program thus far, and what do you see your role as sheriff in being? What's the role for the sheriff in that effort?
Yeah, my take on the deflection program was, it's been stood up very quickly, but there are great people at the table and having those conversations and doing that. Our corrections captain was 30 years at Multnomah County and has a great broad level of experience. And we didn't try to start something from scratch. We mimicked the program over in Marion County, and so And the conversations that were going on were, they wanted law enforcement to lead the program, they wanted the sheriff's office to lead the program. We operate the jail, we have a direct connection to those that are suffering from addiction, an opportunity to connect with them while they may be in our jail. And then our deputies are often interacting with individuals that are suffering from addiction. With September 1st passing now and recriminalization of drugs, they're going to start taking enforcement action on drug possession again, and having a path for someone when they are addicted and it is an addiction issue that's causing it. If they have an opportunity and they're ready to take that step towards that path of support and treatment, then that path is available for them. It doesn't have, you don't have to wait a week or 2 or a month to get into it. We have those options today, because that's when someone's ready to accept help, we have to give them help that day. And so the Sheriff's Office is, one of the ultimate support organizations in Deschutes County. We also run the only jail, which houses all the people that are arrested for different crimes. Many have a contributing factor of addiction. So we have a great platform and a great place and a great organization and location to help host this. Great relationships with the Stabilization Center and the other partners that are at the table to help support this program.
Let me ask you just a follow-up on that. How do you feel about the increased role that the Sheriff's Office takes in mental health issues in that situation you're talking about? Is it something that you embrace, wish someone else would step up to the plate for? How do you feel about that?
I think deputies are often, over my entire career, at times I've been a counselor for different things. But when it comes to that level of mental health crisis, we have great things in place now. Namely the Stabilization Center. We have not only the Stabilization Center building where people can go, or deputies and officers can take people to go and get that respite and get back on track, whether it's medication, support. But it also, we now have mobile crisis. They're responding to calls, and they're taking hundreds of calls away from deputies. And so you're putting a social worker or an expert into a situation if mental health is the only issue, and not an armed deputy. Now, we still work together. We operate on the same radio channels. If they need our support or if they ask for us, we'll be there to help support them. If they take someone into custody, that's ultimately, we take them into custody on the director's hold and take them to the hospital. But great relationships, and I think that's where Deschutes County is leading, is we have these systems in place where law enforcement doesn't have to be the first call or the first responder for a mental health crisis, if that's the only issue.
Okay. Ken, you need me to repeat the question?
Please.
Sure. What's your take on the Deschutes County Deflection program thus far, and what do you see your role as sheriff being in that effort? And then I'll follow up.
Okay. So I currently sit on the OHSU Deflection Committee. I've been sitting on that committee since the House bill was first proposed. They originally approached me for ideas and thoughts because of my involvement in drug enforcement now. Originally, I have always had a really good connection with people that we work with in the streets. Obviously, in drug enforcement, I get a lot of information and talk to a lot of people on the streets that are in different throes of addiction. And we've had a great program even prior to the House bill or Measure 110. We had drug court here in Deschutes County. And it was a phenomenal program that Judge Brady spearheaded when I first got into law enforcement. And so we had a good foundation, and we were kind of seeing the future before 110 became 110, and I think Deschutes County did a good job of that. And then of course we lost that with Measure 110 and had to kind of recreate the wheel again for our needs here in Deschutes County. The biggest thing that I saw developing that was the need for multidisciplinary services, having mental health issues, drug issues, housing issues, and we have learned in the deflection committee that the biggest variable there was housing. It's really hard to become and stay sober without stable housing. And I've been working with Shepherd's House and Lighthouse and a few other organizations with their ideas on sober living facilities, because you can put somebody into a deflection program, but if they don't have that stability foundation for living, they're not going to succeed. I have a big supporter now who I had arrested 7 times, and every time I would arrest her, we would talk about what's your housing situation, where's your foundation, where's your support system, and she didn't have one. So we together as a team would say, here's some housing, here's some service providers, and we'd bring them together. And every time she'd come back into addiction and we'd bring them back together, she would say, I just don't have a safe place to live where I feel safe. So she since succeeded, and now she runs a sober living facility for a third-party service provider, because that's where she found her success. So I use that as a great example of that secure housing. Another thing that we've discussed often is being able to arrest our way out of this. It's just like homelessness. We're not going to enforce our way out of this problem. But what we did find was there were people who were coming to us saying, hey, I'm not in trouble yet, but I want help. And there was no off-ramp for those people that weren't in the system. People who were not been arrested, who've not in the judicial system, but judge isn't telling them to do it. They have found it in themselves of saying, hey, I need these deflection services, how do I get on board? And the deflection committee realized that wasn't there. And so we formatted a couple of plans to where we could divert somebody into that crisis mode or getting that help out of that crisis mode without getting arrested. And that's also a big piece to it. It's not every addict is out there doing criminal things, and so we need to support them as well. And when we did the math, we realized we don't have enough service providers or beds. And people started noticing, well, I have to go to Medford or Reno or Spokane to find a bed because Central Oregon just doesn't have enough beds for that, which is a shame. So we are now looking at different options for housing and stable housing programs, and I think that also goes back to the homeless thing, is we're trying to figure out how do we stabilize the housing with homelessness and drug addiction. And then the service providers and Shepherd's House and Lighthouse reach out to me probably once or twice a week asking me questions about what if scenarios and law enforcement questions and things that they're having in their housing base. And
let me ask you
I
a
think
follow-up. Are you comfortable with the role, with the increase in mental health issues that the sheriff's role plays? With this, I know the stabilization center exists, but deputies are called upon to do more in these times.
they are.
How do you feel about that?
It's hard. Deputies feel well trained now. I think about 5 years ago, before we had the crisis intervention team, they were not as trained. I think our jail has in some ways become a hospital. I think we have more inmates that are, I use the word special needs, but need medical care or not overdose, rehab or mental health issues, and they don't have that support system in the jail, or that's just overwhelmed. I would, if they're committing crimes, they're committing crimes and they're in jail for the crimes. We can't decriminalize that, but I think that sometimes they get better services or better care outside of a jail facility. And I think we have burdened our deputies and our law enforcement too much with mental health. And law enforcement's always been kind of the catch-all. When there's a problem in society that we can't find a fix for, it gets given to law enforcement. And I think over the years we've taken on more and more of that by the nature of being in law enforcement. There's, I think, other ways of bringing that full circle and maybe having more service providers either come to the facility, which I'll tell you, when I first started in this, we never heard of what we have in the jail now. So the jail has come a long way. They have phenomenal programs. The stabilization center was a godsend for law enforcement, but inside the facility, I'd rather see them getting care outside of a facility as long as it's not criminal behavior. But we've criminalized, I think, as a society as a whole, we've criminalized mental health over the years, and the easy fixes put them in jail. And in the end, it doesn't solve the problem. It just makes the circle go around again.
Thank you.
We have another follow-up about deflection, but I want to pick up on that, something you said, and I'll let William go first. I'm curious, in some of Juliana's reporting, we talked about, you know, there hasn't been any training around deflection yet for deputies, so just curious about your take on that. Is that, you know, where are we at with that? Is that a, you know, should we have done better around that to get ready on September 1st?
Well, I think the time frame to even put this in place was already pretty short, and so I think it's pretty remarkable what staff and teams and local people have been able to put together in such a short period of time, plus with the funding and the grant had to come together. So I think we're training last week and this week, right? I mean, we're training right now, not because we're behind, but it just, everything has to be in place. You got to get the people in place and the systems, and now the training's going on. And so I would not see it as a negative. It is come together as quickly as it can, but you got to do it right. And so you're not skipping steps, or can't train people last month if we don't even know the process or how it's laying out. So I think everything's come together very quickly, and I have nothing but positive hopes, and I believe that there's going to be an overwhelmingly positive outcome. The thing about Deschutes County, and that's why we're so blessed, is everyone already works well together. All the people at the table, we can come down, sit down and have conversations, because we do it regularly on everything else. And so this was pretty easy. I'm personally not involved in the deflection, putting that together, but I've been watching, I've been listening, I've been watching our partners and finding the ways that they're putting this together very quickly. And so I'm impressed by what they've been able to do in a short period of time, and very positive looking forward.
Okay.
I would agree with William on that. I think that the House Bill 4002 did not mandate deflection programs. We as a county, I think, did an amazing job, in my opinion, how fast we had it put together, and everybody came to the table fast because we saw the benefits of it, and we're very blessed to have the resources that we have in Deschutes County. There's other counties who are not so blessed, that are still probably going to be years before they can get a program up and running. So I think we're leaps and bounds ahead of many, many counties, especially this side of the Cascades.
Okay.
We've already trained my team. We're already talking about it and excited for it. So I think overall, I think everybody's doing the best they can. I am impressed.
All right. One last thing on deflection, and I'll start with Kent. How will you measure success in this program?
Well, there's going to be several metrics to that. The deflection program, I always compare it to the other alternative sentencing programs we had, like mental health court, veterans court, and getting people through the program and celebrating their successes. And then I think the key to any of those is follow-up, meaning checking in with them and maybe saying, hey, where are you in life and what other support services do you need? I think we get them through the program and then we kick them loose and say, good luck. But if they're in the community and serving the communities, offering them ongoing support through third-party service providers, whether it be finding jobs or housing. But I think the big metric there is getting people through the program and making sure that they're successful, or they have the tools they need to be successful as they go back. Same as in jail, when we release inmates, making sure they have those tools and don't come right back in. I see a great example of that through the Oregon Youth Challenge program, where you take young people that are in different phases of life and don't have that sense of responsibility. The program doesn't change the kids, it gives them the tools to be successful and teaches them how to use those tools. I think that's what we need to put into that deflection program, is making sure they have those tools. Recidivism rates, addiction is a hard thing to measure, because the first, second, third time is not always successful for an addict. So making sure that we don't use that as a metric, I think, is important as well. But I think giving them those tools and following up with them will be the success rates. But I don't know if there's a hard measuring stick otherwise.
Well, I mean, don't you think the public is going to be asking? They're going to be wanting to know that there's success here.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we're going to ask you.
Yeah.
You know?
No, I totally agree. I think that's the measuring stick. But I don't know that we can say, hey, we graduated 100 people today.
Yeah.
That's our success. That just tells us how many people we've pushed through the system, but not necessarily how much success there is in the program. But I think that getting people into the program and having them accept it is the first measuring stick, because that's going to be hard, I think, for many people, is taking that hand and saying, yes, I want help today. I see it every day. And so I think that's your first measuring stick, is, hey, we were able to convince this person to go into the program. And how that handoff looks, if it's with a social worker, or if it's with a third-party provider, or if it's the stabilization center. But there is a little bit of connecting with people. And that's what I think our deputies are amazing at, both in the jail and on the streets, is connecting with people. That's what we do for a living, we talk. So if we can connect with that person, offer them those services, and get them there and have them engaged, that's a win for me. But going out the other side, I really want people to realize that there's more work to be done as a society.
I think we have to look at the word deflection, and so what we're trying to do is deflect people out of the criminal justice system. So success is giving people that path and opportunity to get support, get treatment, get whatever is the right thing for them. And success can't be 100 people are clean and sober for 5 years. The deflection is keeping them out of the criminal justice system. So there'll be a percentage of people that don't want it. Just give me my ticket, or just take me to jail, I'll take that consequence. But if the person is ready and willing to accept help, and whether they've reached their bottom or there's a consequence that they just don't want to, I don't want to do that, I'm willing to go help today. Success is, all right, let's go. let's get you out of the justice system. Let's not arrest you. Again, I agree, you can't arrest your way out of addiction. Success can only be measured by that deflection and keeping people out of the system and giving them the opportunity to help themselves and get clean and make positive steps in their life. So that, I've gone to many of the drug court graduations. One of the most powerful things, and you would even bring a tear to my eye, is watching parents reunited with their kids after drug addiction and seeing the family unit come back together. The family unit is vital to people's success. It's vital to the support systems, and so that's the goal. We need people to get that goal and not just go to jail, and lose their job or lose their housing. Keep people on a path if they're willing to take it. That's why the jail has a court release deputy that focuses on keeping people out in the community if they're safe and it's appropriate. And I think we had, last I checked, over 100 people on a pretrial release system that are being monitored in the community, but they're not sitting in jail. They're still working, they're still contributing, they're still being there for their family, still keeping, taking their kids to school, whatever it might be. That's success for me.
Okay, great. Well, the next question is sort of just, what is your take on enforcing state or local laws that might run counter to your personal beliefs? So one example we used was the effort in 2018 to pass a Second Amendment preservation ordinance in Deschutes County. And yeah, William, if you want to go.
Yeah, the sheriff is sworn in and is charged with enforcing state law. Right, as they're on the books. And oftentimes laws on the books are vague and gray, and they can spend years in court being litigated on what's the interpretation of this. But the law enforcement of the executive branch is not the judicial branch of government. We don't decide what is or is not constitutional. Now, there may be some very clear, black and white issues with the Constitution. And sometimes laws come up that are like, everyone universally can agree that's not appropriate. But that's why we have the court system and appeals process, and judges put stays on things and stop them from going into effect. And so I trust the justice system and the court system. That's why we have a three-part system. My job as sheriff is to enforce the law, just like it's been as a law enforcement officer and serving the county for nearly 24 years.
Right, great.
We agree. I don't think we're that far off. I think that the key word is law enforcement, and we don't make the laws, we enforce the laws. The constitutionality of the laws is decided by the courts. That's what the checks and balance system is for. The sheriff is not probably empowered or trained to interpret the constitutionality of laws, which is why we have attorneys and judges and courts to do that. So if we're sworn in to enforce those laws, that's what we're there to do. I don't know that a sheriff or any law enforcement officer has the ability to override a law.
Oh, they tried.
They've tried, sure. We still see it with the constitutionality, the constitutional sheriff movement that goes on around the world and around the country from the 1970s. And there's nothing in the Constitution that gives the sheriff the power to override the federal government. It's not there. But I think that there is conversation that can be had of, if the constituents say, hey, we don't want to be policed this way, then we can take that to the courts the right way. But again, the sheriff's not going to make that decision and shouldn't make that decision.
Okay.
I think another factor just to bring up there is the sheriff choosing not to enforce laws creates substantial liability for the taxpayers and the agency. So if you choose not to enforce a law, and knowingly, nope, I'm not going to enforce that, and then something bad happens because of that, and you had an opportunity to enforce that law, there's going to be incredible liability and risk you're bringing upon the office and taxpayers, and that's not what our job. Our job is really risk mitigation. We're trying to reduce risk, and not do those things.
The reason we brought the question up is that in 2018, our faith in the office of the Deschutes County Sheriff was undermined by the idea that, publicly he spoke out about not enforcing some of these laws. And so that took us back a little bit. So breaking with your predecessor on that, at least I think in the eyes of this editorial board, would be a good thing. So I'm encouraged to hear that you both are on the same page with that. Julian, do you have a follow-up or anything?
No.
Okay. any, and I'll start with you, Ken, what if any are the issues at the Deschutes County Jail that most need addressing, and how do you plan to tackle those issues? What would be your program?
So corrections deputies tell me that they are frustrated with a few things. The big one is 24-hour access to medical care for inmates and proper staffing. They feel that the current needs of inmates medically right now are limited because of the type of nurse. So I think right now they're using a contract company. They feel that there should be a 24-hour a day RN available. They feel that there should be a 24-hour behavioral health expert inside the jail because right now they're limited to what they can do in the early morning hours or after hours. The skills of some of the nursing staff they feel could be improved with higher pay. A lot of people point to the recent contract at St. Charles where nurses were paid significantly more than they were a couple of years ago, and with that they lost nursing staff back to the hospital, and they feel like they were replaced with less trained medical people. So the first thing that they've come to me with is the medical staff and the behavioral health staff needs to be beefed up. Scheduling continues to be a problem for patrol and corrections, but corrections staff tells me that their current scheduling is not conducive to a family life or good healthy lifestyle. Right now, patrol and corrections work 4 12-hour shifts, 2 day shifts from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. and then they get a day off, and then they work 2 night shifts, 6 p.m. to 6 a.m.
Wow.
Which is rough on the human body.
Yeah.
I can vouch for that, and I'm sure William can too. It's not easy, especially when you've got small children at home and trying to raise a family. So many medical studies have shown that that's really hard on the body. So they're asking for maybe variable schedules or having a different shift in there to kind of put some stability in their daily life. The overall attitude in the jail is they feel supported from admin, but they would like to see some more staffing and help with some of the staffing issues. Which staffing is it's the most difficult thing right now in law enforcement, both corrections and patrol. But those are the top three things that they've come to me with here in the last 6 months, we'll say.
Great.
Can you repeat the question?
Sure. What, if any, are the issues at the Deschutes County Jail that most need addressing, and how would you tackle those issues?
Well, I think the issues have to do with hiring. It is very difficult right now to hire not only corrections deputies. There's a significant difference in the vacancies we have on the patrol side versus the jail side.
More on the jail side?
There are more vacancies in the jail side. Because people that want to do law enforcement as a career, historically, 25 years ago when I was starting, the jail was where you had the opening. That was where the opening, because everyone was transitioning out to the patrol division, at least at our office. And I think that's generally how it's happened across the country. But now, if you have your choice between a vacancy in patrol and a vacancy in corrections, they pay exactly the same. There's no different. They're going to go for the patrol side because that's what they want to do. They're not stuck in a building. They're not surrounded by gray walls. The environment is just different. And so I hear about staffing. Staffing is a concern. It is not for a lack of trying and hiring. That's why 2 years ago I helped create and promote a recruiting team that's now out at military bases and college campuses and any job fairs locally and outside the area, really driving towards showing people who we are, what opportunities we have, and not only as deputies, but also jail staff and medical and nursing opportunities that we have, because we have lots of different jobs in law enforcement. It isn't always being an armed deputy sheriff. And so while when I was applying to be a deputy, we have 1,000 applicants. The last 2 patrol hirings, we had 65 on the patrol side, less on the correction side. And so our pool is small, but we cannot lower our standard for who we are willing to hire. And most deputies that will also tell you they'd rather run short than bring on a person that is unethical or going to cause problems or cause discredit to our profession. And so we have to run a jail. We need to keep certain people confined in the jail, and it takes a certain number of deputies, and Oftentimes that overlap is filled with overtime, and so overtime is a discussion, but it's necessary in the current state of hiring. I think there's been a little bit of a trend better. Our patrol division we just hired 2 on the 3rd, so I think we're down to 3 vacancies, give or take, on the patrol side. Jail side, it was around a dozen last time I checked, and so there's a difference there. Patrol's definitely been helped, but we're also now looking at a number of retirements at the end of the year, and so it's just a constant, we're constantly hiring, getting people through backgrounds, making sure that we're not lowering our standards. The jail environment can be improved, and so that it is a place where people want to come to work and they're willing to spend a career in there. And so, last year we brought on a new food vendor that helped kind of update the food system, because the deputies can't leave for lunch. They get lunch in the jail provided by the contract food company, and I think that's helped. Morale and wellness is an important component of that. That's part of the our wellness efforts with investing in small exercise areas where deputies can go before or after work, or even on duty. I would rather them go on duty and get some exercise if they had a bad call or a stressful incident, and help burn off some of that adrenaline dump. Healthy snacks around the building, focusing on their overall wellness. And I think for me, my role as a captain has had to make those decisions about people's career, both positive and negative. And what I saw was we were having staff that were being exposed to a high number of traumatic incidents in a short period of time, but we didn't know about it because their shifts are rotating, they're busy, they go on days off, and so really focusing on the overall wellness of the staff when it comes to our peer support team, making sure that if we have bad incidents, a traumatic crash or something horrific happens, we debrief, we get the deputies together. One of the things is, Captain, I was realizing is this deputy that was going through a really tough time, he'd been exposed to a number of things, but I had no idea because of the way the shifts work, I just didn't know. And so I implemented a monthly report system now that comes in where I see the deputies that have been exposed to the most type of calls that would likely bring a traumatic incident, death investigations, child abuse, those kinds of calls. So I get now a monthly report of the deputies that are being exposed to that high volume of calls, and then I relate that to our peer support team, so they're doing check-ins to make sure that they're being checked on, so that we don't have deputies that are missing or being missed with effects.
Going back to what you said about, the hiring of corrections versus patrol, is that just a policy decision, or, is that something that, like HR can say, all right, now we're only, you're gonna go back to, you have to start in corrections?
Yeah, they're two different job classifications, two
Okay.
different trainings, academies, and so, the Corrections Academy is much shorter than the Patrol Academy. And so while one certification could cover shift in the other part, they're not certified to, and nor would we just move people back and forth without, their request or their permission.
Okay.
We've had patrol deputies fill spots in the jail on shifts to help cover. They can help walk with a certified corrections deputy to do rounds and hourly checks to ensure the safety of the facility. We also, on the reverse side, 2 years ago, we took over fare operations and fare security, and that's all on overtime. It's reimbursed overtime from the fare, but it is overtime, and so we don't have all the patrol deputies are available to fill us, so we fill them with corrections deputies that can pair up with a patrol deputy to help do those security shifts at the facility. So there's some mild overlap to help support each other, but not just move someone back and forth.
So it's not just you can say as sheriff, all right, this is not how we're going to do it this way now, instead of these two buckets. Let's just
different certifications,
Okay.
different trainings. Again, short term potentially, but I could not do a corrections deputy and just say go out to patrol,
Yeah.
and do patrol.
Yeah.
Um,
All right, let's see. We wanted to touch on the election a little bit. Let's see, I think we start with William on this one. There's always the potential for violence during this time. So there's been some discussion around that nationally. What's your take? Is there a potential for violence in Deschutes County during this upcoming election? And if you're a sheriff, obviously you won't be, what steps would you be taking to mitigate any potential threats?
Yeah, well, there's always potential. We live in a very divided country right now, and even beyond just politics, everything is divided. It sometimes seems like people are trying to find reasons just to disagree versus find the commonalities in what we can agree on. We went through an election once before in 20, and there was some protests. We've had other issues that come up where there's some protests, but Deschutes County is not big metropolitan areas. We are blessed to have people that want to share their voice, want to do it peacefully. I think the worst we've had, if you want to say it was worst, was to walk down the street and block traffic to go from one place to another. But no damage, no criminal mischief that I'm aware of, no rioting. But it's incumbent upon, first off, law enforcement to support that freedom to peacefully gather and freedom of speech, but also protect the rest of the community from violence. And so obviously the sheriff's office per se, outside the county, outside the city of Bend, probably wouldn't be the first person at the table, although we will maintain the safety and security of our courthouse and our judicial system. That's our responsibility. But we'll support the Bend Police Department however we can. And then also just clear expectations to the community. We want you to peacefully demonstrate. We want you to have a voice. We want you to do that without harming or damaging property. And if you do those things, we will take enforcement action because that's a crime. That's not right. As long as you're within the law and doing the things that you're protected to do, we're there to support you because that's what we're sworn to uphold and defend.
Okay. Want me to repeat the question?
No, I don't think our answers would be terribly different.
Okay.
I completely agree with having people protest and redress their government. I think it's an important function of our society, and I think when it's done without violence and in a manner that is productive and can be done under the Constitution, I have no issues with it. The key, I think, there is getting, like we said, setting expectations, giving them the opportunity to have their voices heard, and then also being able to connect with those groups ahead of time and being able to say, what is it you need? What is it you see in this? And letting them make that connection. I think when violence takes over, it's usually because out of frustration or being blocked or prevented from doing that. And I think that if you get ahead of that in a community this size, you will avoid that.
Great, thank you.
Awesome. So next question is, the sheriff's office is facing a number of personnel complaints. I'm just curious, what is your take on that? And what will you do to change the culture of alleged retaliation that has plagued the sheriff's office? And Ken, you want to go ahead and start?
Sure. I have a vision for our sheriff's office. I think it's very important that people feel inspired and they feel safe and really fulfilled at work. I think that's the key to the success. The first goal is to rebuild that trust and connect with our staff and making sure that they're heard and they have the tools that they need. Elections in sheriff's offices are very divisive. They have been for years. This is my 4th election now. This one I can say is probably the worst, maybe because I'm looking at it from a different perspective.
Right.
You're in it.
I'm in it. But I will have to say this is probably the worst I've ever seen. The staff feels really misled, unheard, disconnected from leadership. The frustrations, and we talked about that in the protesting, really came out and boiled over with people, I think, this year, and that's why we saw the creation of this website where employees, I describe it as like the WikiLeaks of our office, where people have now just started pouring information to this website, good, bad, and different. It has created even a bigger wedge in our office. But when people ask me why, I say it's because of frustrations. I think people over the last few years have really felt unheard. Some simplify it and say, well, it's just a random few that are part of it. And I say, well, I don't know if it's a random few, but I think that people are to the point now where they feel like they really need to be inspired to kind of come back and connect with the office. And because of that, they feel like they're being targeted and retaliated against and maybe put out in front where they don't want to be there. And so what that's caused is everybody else to retract. And now we have a situation where people just feel like there needs to be a change in the office. And that was one of the reasons why I was approached was I spend a lot of time when I'm not working teaching other programs and helping others kind of mentor their careers and talk to them about opportunities. And they see and they hear things in the office that lead them to believe that the future will be the same if we don't have a change. So that's my vision to the office. Now the personnel complaints, I'm saddened by them, that somebody gets to that point. I've reached that point as well, I understand it. But sometimes you have to, you really have to get in there and say, well, where's the root problems? And I think if you read those personnel complaints or those tort claims, there's some common themes in all of them. And I would say that that's where we need to start, is change that culture, make people feel appreciated and connected. It's in any work, it's not just in law enforcement. If you worked at the source and Aaron came in here and said, make my coffee and get the heck out of here, I don't want to see your face today, and you heard that every day, there's a point where that relationship breaks down. And I think we're at that point now where the relationship is broken and the office feels like there needs to be a change to get away from that. And I think that once I get to that point with the staff, I can get in there and really make them heard again and connect with them, and we can get people back to the table again. And I think you'll see that go away.
What do you mean by make them heard? Just bring them in, have one-on-ones? Like, what is that specifically?
I think that bringing them in and having them be part of the process and collaborating is a big thing. For a long time, people always say to me, you know, I used to be able to go in there and say, hey, what about option A or option B? You know, right now we'll pick on deflection, right? You know, deflection, how do we fix this problem? Now they feel like they're afraid to say something because it'll get slapped down, or it has in the past. Bringing people to the table, we talked about our jail release officer or deputy who's also part of the deflection program. Great guy. Bringing people like that who have these kind of ideas is key to the success of any office, let alone a sheriff's office. Or bringing in people from the community and saying, hey, here's how we want to do things in Sisters. What are your thoughts? How do you want to be policed in Sisters? Bringing the deputies and saying, hey, here's your group of deputies and Sisters. Get to know them and learn them and be part of the community. Right now we don't have that. We have deputies, it's gotten better, but we have deputies that feel like, hey, I'm just a guy pushing around a police car. I wait for somebody to call 911 and then I go. They don't feel like they have a voice in anything right now. They feel stifled and they're kind of stuck. So bringing them back and saying, how would you make this office better? It's your office. How would we do this better? And inspire them that way. I think that that's one of them. I think that they realize as an office that success breeds that success, and that being able to really have an ability to share their good ideas is where they feel like they're lost. Is they're just there, they're just a body, and they're tired. We have patrol teams that are 5 people on a night shift right now, and they're chasing calls all night long, and they go home and they don't want to work overtime because they're exhausted. They don't want to work anything extra because they feel like if they make one mistake right now, they're going to be targeted. So that's not how you run a sheriff's office. So that's where this is coming from.
All right, thanks.
Got it? All right.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Yeah, of course. Sheriff's office is facing a number of personnel complaints. What is your take on that? And what will you do to change the culture of alleged retaliation that has plagued the sheriff's office?
Sure. First off, I am saddened by
Yeah.
these things. They have not only caused an already divisive office and people that are on edge to even be more on edge. I want to be clear though that when Kent talks about these people, he has not talked for the entire agency, because there's just as many people in the agency that are happy. They are motivated. They do a phenomenal job. And I'm not going to badmouth anyone in our office. My goal is to lead the office and be positive, not focus on the negative. I have nearly been with your sheriff's office for 24 years and had a very successful career. The timing of the 2 tort notices recently with my name on them 3 months before election is unfortunate to me, because that is not who I am, and that's not the person I am, or the type of leader I am. Over my entire career, I've been complimented and supported as a leader within the office. What has fundamentally broken down in our office right now is communication. The inability to talk, because if you talk, it will get used against you in some other manner. And so people are afraid to talk. Now, he mentioned the website, or this Facebook page. I have been a target on that page for a year now. That hasn't bothered him. Many of our officers, ones that are perceived to be supportive of me, have been a target of that page for a greater part of a year. And the vast majority of it is speculation, spun up. It takes a piece of fact and spins it into a complete lie. And it's harassing, it's intimidating to our staff. If I got your quote wrong, please let me know, but you said people should stop doing things to put themselves on there, is what you told one reporter. That's not the type of leader, that's not any leader that I've ever seen, nor any leadership program I've ever been through. That is not the kind of organization that I run, nor will I run. The staff need to be able to communicate up and down. They need to have connection with everyone. And that is one of the goals I've had as a captain, to be as out and about as possible. I'm responsible for 3 substations. I get down there as often as I can to all 3, sit down with the staff, have conversations with them. It has been harder the last 12 months running for office, and plus all of the other things going on right now, to put myself in that position. But that is what I've been good at for the last 22, 23 years. And that's the things, that communication, because I think all of these things could have been resolved with communication. But if administration doesn't know about issues, to my knowledge, deputies have come to my opponent multiple times about these concerns, but he has never brought any of those to the sheriff or any of the command staff, so that we can look into these problems. If you just keep the problem to yourself and use it as a political talking point, that doesn't help the office. That's not leadership.
William, you want to respond? Or Kent, sorry.
First, I would say I don't remember the quote that he's referencing, but I can tell you that many of the things that have been on the Follies page are known facts. There's really not a lot of speculation. I think there's some in there, but to say that that it's a website full of lies, I think that that's foolish at best. What was the second half of the question? We talked about the website, and then...
Well, I just wanted you to respond.
Oh,
to things that
regardless of the communication piece to it, the reason they're coming to me and the reason I'm hearing about this is because they are hopeful for change, and they don't trust the current administration, including my opponent. It's a trust thing. The office does not trust. It's all gone inside the office. There's many people who don't trust each other now. It's shameful to see. We all are friends, and this isn't a Bill and Kent thing. I have no personal qualms with any of this, but I think we're to the point now where the office feels like there needs to be a change, that it needs to change direction, and I think they see that change with me, and that's why they've taken the trust.
Any last thoughts on this?
I just want to say that it's clear to me by the people that I talk to, he does not speak for everyone at the sheriff's office. There is a large majority of people that are happy, that are, I'm not saying it's perfect. In fact, I think September of last year, the office was probably one of the best places it had ever been. And then something happened in October where things have completely taken a dive. And I'm standing there watching the building kind of start to fall apart, and the relationships, people of 20 years don't talk to each other anymore. We've resorted to tort claims over communication, and that seems to be a failure for me. And I'd spend lots of times trying to figure out how to navigate through this, because one of us will win and one of us will not, but there will be an agency that has to still come out of this. Mm-hmm. People have to come together. And when I spoke to the association, I told the entire association, support who you want, but don't destroy each other. Don't destroy your relationships or our office. And that's really all I would ask of our people, is to not destroy each other.
I mean, quick follow-up on that. Both of you still work at this place.
Mm-hmm.
One of you's going to win and one of you's not. What is going to be your approach to create a relationship with each other when this is over? I mean, that's kind of where it's going to start, right?
Yeah,
Someone's going to
absolutely.
have to extend an olive branch or try, right? So,
Or not.
or not, you know, that's fascinating to me. How
Yeah.
are you two going to work together?
It is. I think it would be silly to waste 24 years of experience in an office. I think that there's always going to be use for that experience. So to say, like, we're going to throw, I have no intentions of throwing any of this relationship away. William and I were friends before. I don't know how this is going to fare at the end, but, you know, it has to be a two-way thing. I have no intentions of doing anything wrong the other way. I think that 24 years of experience is important to that office, and I think that that's a relationship that I would rebuild. If I should lose, I still respect the office of the sheriff, and I would support any of his ideas or wishes. That's something that I wholeheartedly believe in. That's the beauty of an election, is that there's always a loser in the election or a price to pay, but I think that the important thing to take away for me and the whole office is we still have to respect the office of the sheriff and the important work that we do.
Thoughts, William?
I have no different. I've been asked that multiple times. What
Yeah.
happens?
Right.
Well,
Yeah.
we get together, we talk, we figure out what you know. I think he and I agree on a lot of things.
Right.
So and can be great partners and working together. I do my very best to just talk about myself and what my goals are, to not talk about his goals or what he's doing, but they often overlap with the same ideas, the same thought processes. And I've told many people my first call will be to him. Let's sit down, let's have coffee, let's talk, and then we both got to get back to work. Because the office,
I know that doesn't make a very exciting interview, but
you know, we work for 210,000 people that don't,
Yeah.
I mean, they really don't care what's going on in the office or who, right? They want the service, they want public safety,
Yeah.
they want, when you call 911, a deputy shows up or to help solve whatever the problem is. And that's what we have to focus on.
Is it my
Your turn,
my
Aaron.
turn? In the interest of time, I think we're going to have to bypass the individual questions we're going to ask this, you can't see our
Well, I
list.
think, okay.
Some residents have criticized the office spending habits, slushy machines, golf carts. What is your stance on the sheriff's office spending? Do you plan to address those taxpayers' concerns? Are they real? And William, I'll start with you.
Sure. Well, this is a multi-hour conversation. This isn't something that can be answered in one sentence.
Don't drop too deep into the budget.
And
You'll lose.
but I have a lot to say. But,
Yeah.
look, we are a government agency. All of our money is taxpayer money. We have 2 tax districts that fund the majority of our operations, and then we have transient room tax, which is visitors visiting Deschutes County to help support us. Our tax rates were set based on support from transient room tax. I think you've said you want to go away from using transient room tax. I think that's the complete wrong decision. Visitors use a tremendous amount of resource from the sheriff's office and county, and that has to be a funding source for us. I'd like to actually see that increased. But every agency is looking for ways to buy tools to make the job to be better or safer or easier. They're also looking for ways after George Floyd to have better relationships and connections with the community. And so the slushy machine, I think Kent is the only one that said he doesn't like that purchase. I've talked to dozens and hundreds. The Bulletin even endorsed the slushy machine. So we're not talking about something that's so controversial. And when we're talking about an investment, it's a $3,200 investment over 10 to 15 years that we're going to be able to do this. And it is singly the most popular tool in the Lapine area right now that kids want to have deputies and slushy machines. We use it at events, we use it at different functions, and it's a relationship builder, it's a connection. Kids love it, and anytime we can build and bring deputies in the community together, I'm all for it, I support it. The other big topic is the patrol carts that were purchased. I wasn't involved in the purchase of these patrol carts, but I don't disagree with it. We took over security operations for the fair, over 300-acre facility, large complex, 150,000 visitors during the fair alone, and that complex gets busier and busier every year. More events, more people there. And we need a tool to help facilitate getting the deputies high visibility, getting into incidents, responding from the interior to the exterior. They're adding camping, campgrounds. One lieutenant told me after this fair we could not do what we do at the fair without the patrol carts to be there. And so we buy tools for the deputies to help them do their jobs. Those patrol carts reduce injuries. They reduce strain on the deputies that are already there on their day off and on overtime. The rodeo alone, with the bull escape, we had 2 deputies go out with knee injuries just from running to an emergency, which can happen at the fair. They also give us a high visibility during a fight, during a crowd incident, that we can push in, get the problem out of there, and then get out of the way, so that we're not dealing with 100 people, we're just dealing with the 1 person. And so these are well thought out tools. They're not just runaway spending. And if we're going to look at spending, we also have to compare all of our spending. There's been a lot of focus on me as a captain, but he has spending authority over certain things, but there's been no focus on those things. And so we have to look at the whole picture, not just the things that I'm involved with, not just the slushy machine and the golf cart.
Did you want to specify about the spending on the other end?
Well, I think you use tools, right? You buy tools, and they're tools you need, but there may be some people that don't think you need them. So whether it's, I don't know how many drones we have right now, more than probably any other agency, but we're also a different type of agency. We're spread out. We have different geographical areas. It's hard. We're not like a city PD. And so I'm not saying that his purchases or things he thinks that we need are good or bad, but he made the decision that he thinks that we need those things. But I don't focus on those. There's just been a lot of focus on the slushy machine. And it's kind of silly.
From our part, I'm glad, because we don't usually get to slushy controversy in these editorial departments.
It's really not a controversy. It is beyond me why that has been. I mean, for the first 6 months, that's all I heard about.
Kent, you want to pick up there?
I'd have to agree. The slurpee machine kind of picked up a life of its own. I think the timing and the optics were probably the biggest problem there. The taxing districts went to maximum amounts.
Yeah. A lot of tourism.
A lot of tourism. The tourism comment. So I am not a believer in becoming dependent on those supplemental incomes. So being dependent on the tourism tax is not reasonable. It's unstable. So to kind of forecast your future spending on a tax that becomes variable is really not a safe thing to do. Becoming, and I think realigning and controlling and cutting your current expenses is where we need to focus. We went up 16% in our budget, not this last year, but the year prior, and that was the same year as the Slurpee Gate and the golf cart thing and all that. And I think that a lot of questions got asked, both internally and externally, is hey, you just upped my property taxes. I know mine went up 11% just from the sheriff's levy. And people asked, I had neighbors asking like, hey, what happened? Like my tax bill just jumped. And then news stories come out about purchases. People have to associate, hey, my property tax bill is now connected to a golf cart. The community doesn't see the value in it. And so sometimes you have to say, was this the best money that we could spend at this time right now? Maybe offering an explanation to the community of, hey, here's what we're thinking about doing, before the community says, my property tax bill came, what did you buy? Oh, wait a minute, you bought a Slurpee machine and a golf cart? With no explanation. I think the optics of it is what made it probably come to life as much as it did. I don't disagree that it's a good tool, but is it the best use of money? For example, a week rental for a golf cart at the fair is $500 versus the 33,000. Could we have done something differently during this time frame when we just asked taxpayers to pay 11% more on the property taxes? Is that the timing of it could have been better? When deputies come and start asking each other, what do we have this thing for? Like, why do we have this? They don't understand. We didn't even explain it internally why we were doing what we were doing. And so that obviously spawned some of that. So my concern has been the spending, and sometimes we don't explain it to people the way we should. Could we have done better? Yes. Can we do better? I totally agree we can do better. I think like a business person, is that the best use for the dollar? What's my rate of return or my rate of investment on this purchase? And I think that in government, when I came to the government work 20 years ago, rather than trying to save money, put money away, we try to get as close to zero at the end of the year as we possibly can in government work now. And that mindset can be frustrating to people who don't understand it. And so the questions do get asked of what else are we spending money on? Because if we're buying these things, what do we not know about behind the curtain? And I don't think we've been very transparent with that, because I struggle with budgeting a smaller organization now to where I explain because I get funded from the federal government, I have to explain to the federal government where we're spending our money at code and how we're spending it down to the penny. And they always say the same thing to me. Well, hey, you still have $5,000 in this account. You spend it before July 31st. And I would say, we don't need anything. What do you mean spend it? Just spend it. Whatever, you need that, just buy that. And I will refuse and say, we're not gonna spend $5,000 on a camera when I don't need a camera. But that's what the government procurement process has created. And I think that there's a way of realigning that to where we can get our budget back down and turn that dial back the other way on people who are paying their tax bills. Right now, the only alternative we have, because people point to this year's upcoming budget and say, well, it only went up 0.5%. And I say, well, there was no more money to squeeze out of the taxpayers because we've already maxed out both dials, so of course it's not going to go up more than 5 or half of a percent point. So I think we need to celebrate opportunities to save money, and it's not easy, but it can be done.
I guess I'm trying to understand, square the two things. You want to say maybe we don't take the full TRT, but as a taxpayer in Deschutes County, the TRT doesn't cost me anything. I mean,
No.
putting into the money that I don't have to pay now.
No, my point is don't be dependent on it.
Okay.
Because if we're budgeting items in long term, like a long-term budgeting process, and we're thinking, okay, we're going to get X amount of dollars from the TRT, and then something happens in the world and people don't travel, or for whatever reason, something happens in Deschutes County, they don't want to come here, or whatever may happen, people don't travel here, or maybe they don't spend as much money here because the economy changes. Then 3 years from now, we're scratching our heads thinking, oh, well, maybe we shouldn't have budgeted for this item off that TRT. Maybe we should have long-term budgeted it. But when we're looking at numbers, the number that we're talking about is not a very big number in the grand scheme of the budget. The TRT is not something that we're going to make or break us.
Mm-hmm.
So I use TRT as an example, but it's such a small amount of money comparatively speaking to our entire budget process.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I have a quick follow-up question, if I may, and since we're short on time, let us do maybe a minute per answer.
Sure.
But just, I know you guys both kind of mentioned with the spending, like a communication was a big portion of that.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious, how do you plan to improve transparency and communication between the sheriff's office and the public, if elected sheriff? And William, if you want to go first.
I think communication is again back to key.
Yeah.
That was one of the reasons that when I was a sergeant, I helped create and put together the Public Information Officer program, was because our office and our deputies do so many great things, we didn't have a way to communicate it.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to continue to see that program grow. It's hard during an election year. The Public Information Officer the number of public records requests coming into our office that are specifically targeted or weaponized for this election is incredible. It's kind of shocking, actually. But we can communicate better. We have social media. We have different public events, coffee with the deputies or coffee with the sheriff. We've done all those things. Even as a PIO, no matter how many times I talk about scams or things about how to warn the community, it seems like there's always people that don't hear it. We do it on the news and every possible, but there's still people. And so we have to continue to have that voice, but we also need the deputies to have that voice too and help them and get that buy-in from them. So they're supporting the idea of whatever is going on, and they may not agree with everything. They may not even understand everything, but we can explain it better. And I think as sheriff, I want to have those quarterly meetings with the staff, the line staff at every level. So they have an opportunity to talk to me. I have an opportunity to talk to them. They can bring up their questions in a safe space where, any question is fine. We can answer those questions. Everyone come to the table understanding that we're all people trying to do a tough job and give each other a little bit of grace. But we have a tough job. We can work together and get a lot accomplished. I think TRT, 30% of our patrol calls come from tourism. Mm-hmm. And so that has to be a funding source.
Yeah.
And tourism isn't going to turn off and bend over the next year. unless something drastic happens, and then everyone's going to be seeing the effects of that. But TRT has gone up 12 of the last 13 years, but our contribution from the county has been very minimal growth, and so we need to continue to use those funds where they're needed for public safety. And I'm going to continue to fight for those dollars to keep, because 80% of our budget is people.
Yeah.
Right, of course.
Yeah.
No, I agree. I think that the communication piece and the buy-in piece from the community is important. I think that bringing people in from the community or the communities, whether it be Lapine, Sun River, Redmond, or Sisters, and having them have a say in how they want to see their tax dollars spent with recommendations, and then taking those recommendations to heart and visiting with the deputies as to what they actually need to function and do their jobs. I think that the communication is the key for all of it.
So we'll just do one. I'm going to have Jennifer follow up with a couple of individual questions for you too, but last question is just, hopefully inside a minute, just what differentiates you from your opponent? And we'll start with Kat.
Okay, I think my experience, my education, and my knowledge in both the business and in the leadership world makes a big difference. I've been recognized and awarded my leadership with the FBI LEADA program, top 40 under 40 with the Cascade Business News. My volunteerism with the community separates my connections, I think, with the Latino Community Association, with Angel Flight, with the Oregon Youth Challenge program. But I bring a vast, in-depth knowledge of finance and business that makes me kind of a unique individual in the law enforcement world. So those are the big ones.
All right, thanks so much.
Well, I've been at the Sheriff's Office for a few years longer from a sworn position. I worked in the jail for 6 years. I think that the sheriff is responsible for running a jail, and I'm the only candidate that's served in the jail in a corrections deputy capacity. I've also worked in all 3 divisions and at every rank up to captain level. And I think the sergeant job is great, and Ken does a phenomenal job at code, and I would only give him public kudos for that. But there are things that you learn at the rank of lieutenant and captain that prepare you to lead an office in a sheriff's office. Sergeant is first line supervisor. Their day-to-day operations. Captains are running a division, running a budget, personnel issues, hiring, internal investigations, imposing discipline when necessary. Those are all experiences that I have as a captain that has made me the best prepared. And then also just my selfless heart. I'm not doing this for me in any way, shape, or form. In fact, it'd be way easier not to run for sheriff, but I care about the community. I care about the sheriff's office, and there is a tremendous number of phenomenal people in our organization that we just need to get back together on the same page. And we have to, this isn't surprising, an election is divisive. 2 people internally, and you can look at any office that ever gone through that. We're a little probably better at being divisive, maybe at this point is a bad way to put it, but it just is what it is. We will get through this. I was warned September and October are going to be the worst. Well, September started out really right on track,
Right.
and we'll see how October goes, but after November, we're all the same, we all wear the same uniform, we all do the same job. We all have families. We all should be working on putting each other up, not tearing each other down is my philosophy. And we'll come back together as an office and hopefully not skip a beat come January 7th of 2025.
Well, go ahead.
I really appreciate you guys taking the time to come in and sit down with us, and also for putting yourself out there in September and October. And it's never smooth, even if you were running for any other office. So hats off to you for community service. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate your time today. Yeah.